Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bob Pompiani, KDK Sports. We're here live at Heinz Field on a beautiful day and a beautiful record for the Steelers right now. Perfect. 8 wins, no losses. They're going to go for 9 in a row this coming week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who come to Heinz Field. However, there's a lot to talk about, not just last week's win over Dallas for Mike Tomlin. That's 3 road wins in a row, but also news this week about COVID issues. And today the Steelers had to put 4 players, including quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, on a COVID reserve list. Not that they've tested positive. It's more for an abundance of concern moving forward. Not unlike what we saw last week with Marlon Humphrey of Baltimore and then subsequent players being on that list as well. And by the way, all those players did return to play on Sunday. So that is the backdrop as we get set for Mike Tomlin, who is ready to address the media over at the South Side. We'll take you there now live as the Steelers get set for the Cincinnati Bengals, trying to get 9-0.
Good afternoon. We're excited to be back into the kitchen. The AFC North, we got the Cincinnati Bengals and their quarterback Joe Burrow coming into Pittsburgh, and we're excited about that challenge. But before we get to some of that, I have an injury report and talk about some player availability related things. We're hopeful that we're going to get a return from a number of guys that have missed some time. Mike Hilton has a chance to play this week. Derek Watt has a chance to play this week. Tyson Alualu all have a chance to play this week. We'll monitor them throughout the week in terms of their work and the quality of it. But we're excited about getting those guys back into the fold if we can. We had a bunch of other bumps and bruises associated with play that may limit some people from an availability standpoint at the early portions of the week, but nothing in game that happened of any major significance in Dallas. As you guys are all aware, we've been dealing with COVID-19 significantly this week. We have a player who has tested positive for COVID. He will not be available this week. Obviously, he's resting at home and going through all the necessary things as it pertains to that. But we also had a number of players, I think 4 that were acknowledged and released this morning, who are also in the program because of contact. And so it is our desire to participate wholly in the procedure. Those guys will be working remotely throughout the week and testing daily. As long as their tests come back negative, we believe that all 4 guys have an opportunity to be made available to us on Saturday. Some of the guys have more experience than others. And so we'll lean on that experience. Guys like Ben and Vince Williams, man, have an opportunity to suit up and play for us this weekend. And they'll simply work remotely and sharpen their sword in that way. And really, it'll probably give their bodies an opportunity to get some much needed rest. And we're, optimistic that those guys will be their normal selves if given an opportunity to play this weekend. And some of the others will make judgments based on how the week transpires. Their lack of a resume or experience could be a factor in determining whether or not we utilize those guys. That's just the reality of it. We got a lot of decisions to make in this environment, as a lot of people do, and how we manage it, the players that we choose to utilize, how we highlight their positive traits, how we work to minimize some of their negative traits or lack of experience is a big component of us pushing through this. These are issues that everybody in the league has to deal with. And so from that standpoint, it's fair and the playing field is fair. We're working our tails off to adhere to the protocol. It's actually been a good experience the last couple of days working with New York, sorting through some of the details associated with this and seeing how procedurally things get done. We got a great deal of confidence in the protocol, in our participation in it, its effectiveness, and hopefully as we continue to push through the week, we'll get clarity in terms of the players' availability, those that are being held out, and hopefully the guys that are working will continue to test negative. We're also taking additional precautions with how we work. There's been a number of things done throughout our facility in addition to our normal COVID protocol. All our meetings this week are scheduled to be virtual, whether it's unit meetings or individual meetings, all will be done remotely. The guys will simply come into the building to walk through and to practice. And then even our post-practice meetings and so forth will be done remotely. All the things that they do in terms of taking care of their bodies or maintenance in their bodies, weight training, et cetera, will be done on a rotational basis to minimize close contact in an effort to isolate any potential COVID things that we may be dealing with. The guys have done an awesome job in terms of their attitude regarding it and working to be within the protocol. And I can't say enough about that. I think our attitudes will really kind of define our level of success in terms of dealing with this. And that's something that we've talked openly about all season, but it's really cool to see it come to fruition. Can't say enough about the guys in that regard. Specifically this week, man, let's talk Cincinnati Bengals. Man, been really impressed with their quarterback, Joe Burrow. He's as good as advertised. His physical talents are one thing, and you know, they're rock solid, man. This guy can make every throw. His accuracy is exceptional. He's a good decision maker. He's a fluid decision maker. His mobility is really underrated. He's an easy mover. He can escape and create. They also have some design quarterback runs that are challenging in the red area and so forth. But the most impressive thing has been, you know, his charisma or his moxie or his competitive spirit. It's obvious that he's an energy bringer. It's obvious that he brings the best out in his teammates, man, and they're really getting a good vibe off of his play and his energy. He has them headed in the right direction. He's got some awesome weapons at receiver, starting first with Tyler Boyd, a guy that we know well and have a lot of respect for. Tyler has consistently, over the course of his career, continued to evolve and really has just made himself one of the elite interior slot receivers, one that needs to be reckoned with, particularly on possession downs and in the red zone. He works great in between the hashes and in the middle of the field. He's tough and competitive. He's got strong hands. They have longer, more challenging guys from a height standpoint on the perimeter. We know A.J. Green and his resume. He's been at it for a long time, and we're familiar there. But they got a new component in T. Higgins out of Clemson, who's 6'4" and change. Is making some quality plays for them as well on the outside. In the running back room is Joe Bixton and Gio, a collective that they've had for a number of years now. They've got a nice division of labor with that group. Can't say enough about the quality players that they are. Joe's been over 1,000 yards the last 2 years and is doing some really good things in that direction this year. He did miss the last game or two. Gio is a more than capable caddy, if you will. He's a third down back. He's good at blitz pickup. He's good out of the backfield. Has been big in the screen game for them. So, you know, his eligibles and the collection of people that he has to work with has a wide variety of talent, and that's going to be challenging as well. On the other side of the ball, just been really impressed, man, with the development of Carl Lawson, their edge rusher out of Auburn, who just continues to evolve. He is a catalyst for their rush. He's the type of guy that can break a pocket down. He's the guy that you need to be cognizant of where he is. It is unique and interesting to look at a Cincinnati front and not have to deal with Carlos Dunlap. We do not miss Carlos Dunlap. Gino is working in a different capacity now for him, focusing exclusively as a situational rusher. So we expect him to bring energy when he comes into that area of play. Can't say enough about their safety tandem. Bates and Bell are quality through and through. Bates is more of a center fielder. Bell is more of a down safety or box safety, covering tight ends and so forth and blitzing. But collectively, man, that tandem has been really solid for them. You got to be cognizant of where Bates is at all times. He's a ball hawk, the type of guy that can get the ball back. And so we need to do a really good job, obviously, of safeguarding the football, particularly under the potential circumstances that we could be working in this week with younger quarterbacks preparing to play or potentially playing or been playing without a lot of physical repetition. We got to do a good job of taking care of the ball and do the fundamental things well in an effort to minimize negativity in those scenarios. But happy to open it up for questions.
First question, Mike Pursuta. Mike, go ahead.
Mike, looking back at Dallas, when they had the ball on third down, in retrospect, were you happy with the personnel groups, the various ones that you used, or might you be looking at that again?
We're gonna be looking at that. You know, when you're not working in the ideal situation, when you're losing people, you mix and match and you do the things that you need to do to get out of a stadium with the win. We were able to do that, but this week starts anew. We have, you know, different people available to us, so we're gonna, you know, formulate a plan that includes the best mix of available players.
Next up, Brooke Pryor, go ahead.
Mike, Vance McDonald missed practice on Friday with an illness, tested negative, and still traveled with you guys. How do you make the determination whether or not a player can still travel, even if he's tested negative, knowing that he is showing some signs of an illness and could eventually develop a positive test?
Those aren't decisions that are made by us. It's really cut and dry. It's all in the procedural policy of COVID established in New York by the NFL. As long as he is negative and not showing signs of COVID, he's able to travel, and he was, and we did, and we don't overanalyze it in that way. We utilize all the mechanisms at our disposal to minimize the potential of interaction. We're all masked up. We're all exercising good personal hygiene and social distancing. We're doing all the things that are asked, and that's our mindset regarding it.
Dale Lawley, go ahead.
Mike, there was a report yesterday that Ben suffered injuries to both knees. Was that correct? And was there ever any question about him playing next week?
Ben had some bumps and bruises associated with play that happened in the first half. He was able to come back into the game and finish the game. He is not in question.
Mark Caboli, go ahead.
Mike, there have been games that Ben hasn't practiced and played, but there hasn't been anywhere he's not even in the building. What challenges are there relaying a game plan without face-to-face contact?
We're not overly concerned about that, to be honest with you. We've had a lot of practice here in 2020 at installing and giving information and receiving information remotely. We've done this with our entire playbook multiple times already throughout this process. In the offseason, we installed, I think, twice in the spring. We have no reservations about the remote meetings this week. As a matter of fact, from a coach's standpoint, we're excited about the challenge of keeping the group engaged and utilizing all the tools at our disposal to make sure that we have good and productive meetings in spite of circumstance.
Jerry Dulac, go ahead.
Hey, Mike, are you able or allowed to identify the player who tested positive, and can you confirm that Ben had a negative test?
I'm not getting into any declarations of positive or negative tests and so forth. I'm sure you guys have the information. I've seen it all over. I'm not going to confirm or deny any of that.
Jeff Hathorn.
Mike, if Ben can't go, would it be Mason Rudolph, and then why Rudolph over Dobbs?
We're going to work both young quarterbacks this week. Mason's going to get the bulk of the work. That's the position that he's in. But we'll play it by ear as we proceed through the week. I'm not opposed to playing anybody that increases our chances of winning based on what we're looking at.
Tim Benz, go ahead.
Mike, can you clarify then, if you can't identify the player, the way the procedure works? I know it's very important the timeline from which they were first diagnosed of having symptoms. So if a player tests negative and then later gets a positive after showing symptoms, from what point do you decide that he has tested positive? Or do you have to presume that it was a false negative?
I have no idea what you just asked. But
I mean, it's confusing the way that it's written, that if you have somebody who ends up playing that initially tested negative, but then showed symptoms, from what point do you have to go to determine how long out they are before they can return?
I think the time is based on the positive test, but I don't have 100% certainty regarding that. We're working closely with New York on things such as that. There's been some changes along the way. We're all working extremely hard to combat this and to stay ahead of it. So there's not a lot of fluidity in it at times, and I understand the lack of clarity. That's why we speed dial New York often.
Will Graves, go ahead.
And Mike, I'm just curious, the positive test for the player, was that the test that was that Sunday or was it Saturday? Do you know when it was administered, the one that he tested positive for? And I think
it was a test that was administered Sunday, which the results came back Sunday night or Monday morning.
I mean, I think I asked you this last week in regards to Humphrey, but I mean, is there any way are you aware of the NFL talking about any process that speeds up the results so that before you take the field whether guys are good to go or not?
I'm not in New York. I don't know about developing policy and things of that nature. I'm just working my tail off here in Pittsburgh to keep this group up and in compliance.
Albie Oxenreiter.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. Can you enlighten us a little bit or clarify the protocol? Are there masks worn on planes?
100% of the time.
And also, can you say that at this point, at least as things stand right now, you don't see this situation affecting the game on Sunday?
I don't have a crystal ball. One of the things that 2020 has taught us is we better appreciate today. We better do everything in our power to stay clean of COVID. And that's what we're doing. And so, it'd be complete speculation on my part to make any judgments about us or about global things relative to COVID that are beyond today.
Alan Saunders.
Hey, Mike, I wondered if you had any insight on what led to the individuals that have been contact traced being selected. It's not like an obvious fit, like a whole position group or something like that.
No, we all have these tracking devices, these GPS devices that track contact and close contact, the extent of it, the length of it, et cetera. When someone tests positive for COVID, man, the analysis of these devices is a critical component. There are interviews conducted by the NFL officials, and they determine level of concern regarding the potential exposure of people, and they lead the charge in terms of putting people in categories or whether or not they end up on COVID lists, et cetera.
Ray Fittipaldo, go ahead.
Mike, as mentioned previously, Ben has played with limited or no practice reps in the past. What can you learn from those experiences that could potentially help you this week as you prepare for the Bengals?
I'm not overly concerned about it. This guy's been doing this job for 17 years. He's got snap experience that he can call upon. We're still going to work extremely hard virtually to prepare. A lot of his work is above the neck anyway in terms of preparation. I have very little concern about it, to be quite honest with you.
Chris Adamski, go ahead.
Mike, the decision to dress Avery Williamson and not play him Sunday, but just kind of have him as an emergency, and he wasn't, obviously didn't practice with you yet, and I don't want to say it anyway, it's a good thing, but not having Vince this week is Avery getting those extra reps, will that help him kind of assimilate better into the defense?
And your question, I'm sorry?
Avery, will he get more reps now? If this is good for him to assimilate better in the defense with Vince not available?
Yeah, he's going to get a lot of physical reps in preparation this week. He prepared remotely last week, and he's a veteran guy, but we had no intentions of using him unless we were forced into it. Thankfully, we were not. He gets a complete week's work this week with us and in the building and on the field with his teammates, and I'm looking forward to it.
Mark Caboli.
Mike, just for clarification standpoint, if Ben comes back with 2 negatives and he's cleared on Saturday, would he be able to take part in the walkthrough on Saturday?
Yes.
Thank you.
Brooke Pryor, go ahead.
Mike, you guys were fined for not complying completely with mask wearing in the game, I believe, against the Ravens. Were you able to identify where you fell short, and do you feel like you've been able to correct that going forward?
I didn't ask, to be quite honest with you. We just accepted the punishment and moved on with our day. We're working extremely hard to comply in all areas, and that those efforts will continue.
Will Graves.
Mike, I don't remember Watt being on the injury report last week. You said he was unavailable for Sunday. Did he re-aggravate something? And how much, you struggled in short yardage on Sunday. Is not having maybe a fullback back there a problem in that area?
Yeah, he took a step back as we got close to game time, if you will, in terms of availability. But there are no excuses in terms of our short yardage failures. We own that. We have players at our disposal if we so choose. Henry Mondu has also played some fullback for us. We just weren't very good from a planning or a playing standpoint in the situations that you mentioned.
Final question, Tim Benz.
Mike, now that you've had some time to look at it, what were you able to determine was going wrong with the place kick blocking, and was Dallas getting away or skirting around perhaps that leaping rule? They
were flat getting after us in the teams game, not only in the block game, but they had a big punt return, they had a big kick return. they were a step ahead of us, and they were aggressive, and you got to give them credit for that. And we'll just get back in the lab, man, and get back to work this week with the intentions of being better versus the Bengals.
All right. Thanks, Coach.
All right, that's Mike Tomlin at his press conference. And, of course, the big news today was the COVID situation. McDonald tested positive last week or after the game. He played in the game. He had some symptoms, but he traveled after he tested negative. So this is one of those things that teams have to deal with day in and day out. And the Steelers, citing an abundance of caution here, now have placed 4 players on that COVID reserve list. Again, no indication that they've taken a positive test, but they are there, and they will work remotely. That includes Ben Roethlisberger. But if he passes those 2 tests this week, he should be able to play. And if not, Mike Tomlin says pretty much all hands on deck there with regard to Mason Rudolph, who will get the majority of snaps at quarterback. Josh Dobbs also in the picture, but this will all play out as the week goes on. And there's a lot to talk about with the Cincinnati Bengals. Certainly it's a team that has a lot of young players making big plays at big times. They come here, and they've been competitive in a lot of their games, led by the rookie Joe Burrow, who has 11 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. But he has been sacked 28 times this season. The Steelers are among the best, if not the best, at getting after the quarterback. So that'll be one of the things certainly to watch. But as far as everything else this week, it'll be done remotely when it comes to meetings and weight training. The only time guys will be together will be actually on the practice field over on the south side. So that's where we stand right now. We'll have much more coming up today on KDKA News at 4, 5, and 6. And then later tonight, I want to remind you, coming up this week, it's the Mike Tomlin Show. Missy Matthews will join me, head coach Mike Tomlin. That's 11:30 on Saturday night. You can see it on KDK TV, and then afterwards on the Steelers YouTube channels. So there's a lot going on this week, and the game has been moved from 1 to 4:25 in case you missed that as well. Sunday, after the Steelers have won 3 straight games on the road, which is a tough and tall assignment, but they did it, winning in a variety of ways and showing a lot of resilience along the way to get to 8 wins and no losses. They'll go after number 9 this weekend against Cincinnati. And that's going to do it. Our thanks to the people who watched here on Pittsburgh CW and those of you on all the Steeler media platform. Thank you for joining us. We'll do it again next Tuesday for another edition of the Mike Tomlin Press Conference. Until then, have a good day, everyone. We'll see you later on KDKA.